Okay, so this is going to be a standard kind of approach because it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up with this like fully formed model of reality in my head, and particularly it's a model of reality about models, and it derives from a bunch of other things that I've been thinking about. And I got up and I wrote down a note, and it was about cognitive models. And cognitive models are a scaffold. Cognitive models, let me put my glasses on so I could read this. The codified, rehearsed, professionalized models that we test people on the characteristics of beginners. Experts in all realms have internalized the performance of the skill so that it has become second nature. But then we say in interviews, assessments, and evaluations over and over again, show your work, as though we were asking a driver to justify their use of the brakes in real time and talk through their sense of the road in addition to driving. Then it gets worse. We replace the masterful performance, which was the standard. If there was when there was guilds, there were masters in the performance who said, yes, okay, you're great at this now, you move on. We've standardized that and then replaced the masterful performance with a credential, and forget that the credential was actually designed to bring somebody up to speed. It's not the actual performance, it's the ability to articulate the scaffold that has been designed as a temporary stage in the development of expertise. Expertise was the last word there. And so I actually had a couple of other notes in my Obsidian folder that also have the word cognitive models in the title. There's one that's just labeled cognitive models that talks about, in fact, the ways in which machine learning models, large language models, maybe that they're the biggest danger and flaw in large language models may be the fact that they're entirely disembodied. They have no sense organs, so they replicate the worst aspects of Western thinking. We map what we think with to the mechanisms of communication, and it's not a one-to-one linking. I have another cat. We actually think with a wide range of gestures, images, sensations. We intuit, we sense into systems, and then we communicate. We resort to language to communicate. So we use language, as I'm doing right now with this, to try and elicit comparable, overlapping neural structures in the other human being. So let's see, to elicit an overlapping model or experience in the adjacent body. The adjacent body is the person that we're talking to. To recruit more synapses, because we use our synapses to recruit bodies and our capacity to make sense of the world into the entropy management. Entropy management. And we recruit more synapses to the story or cognitive model. In pursuit of homeostasis, we must understand and embody that understanding. But if you can't enact a cognitive model, it cannot have any impact on the world. So then the other thing that I was writing about was cognitive models compared with intuition. Let me see if I can just search that. Cognitive. There's like 4 different labels that have the word cognitive model in their title. Hello, kitty. Then there's cognitive dissonance, which is about how it feels to have the cognitive dissonance of a moral injury. Cognitive versus embodied models. This is something I've talked about for years and years when I worked in higher education, and we talked about there's this thing called the threshold concept, which is something which once someone has genuinely understood it, it becomes a part of their sense of how they think of the world and how they interpret it. It's a concept which, once it's understood, causes a permanent shift in thinking. I'm not reading a thing. I don't know if you can tell whether I'm reading or whether I'm talking out loud or from memory, but so that's called what did I say that was? A threshold concept. So I think threshold concepts led me to this idea. I remember saying there was so many things like, do you know something or do you just think it? So can you just say the words, but you haven't really internalized them? They're not part of um, how you actually interpret things at a unconscious level. This is the other cat. This is Darwin, who's sticking his foot up my nose. Let me put my glasses back on, baby. I need to read the next section. Do you know it? Well, I remember saying, like, do you know that? Like, is it something that you can say in words, or do you know it? Is it something in your body? I remember saying at one point to one of my friends, I said, oh my God, marriage is how men keep us from having babies with other men. And she said, you knew that. And I was like, yeah, no, I knew it. But now I suddenly was like really conscious of it. So what did I say? Has it become a part of your sensing system in a way that you can bring it into concert with other parts of the web? Or does it exist as a concept in here, which has yet to find a site in your inner map? So what I'm talking about is that as you incorporate a thought or concept or a part of the map that's foreign to you into your body, you bring it inside and you can hold it in relationship with other parts of the map. So you're carrying around a map in your body that incorporates, literally brings into the body all of the various concepts that you have genuinely absorbed and have as capacity to think with, not to think about, but to think with. And then what about the pieces that we can't situate, that we carry around for decades waiting for them to drop into place? This is something that I think it was George Kelly who talked about cognitive dissonance at the beginning. Cognitive dissonance is holding an idea. The way I describe it now is that it's holding an idea we haven't been able to incorporate. So it's literally a disembodied thought waiting to find its place among the universe of ideas that inhabit your form. And then I've got a note to myself to relate it to the imperfections in crystals. So there's this thing, and if you have a perfect crystal, it can't distort, it can't stretch, it can't bend. As a crystal of metal bends, what's actually happening is that there are imperfections in the crystal that absorb the movement. If you have a perfect crystal, all that can happen is that the bonds between the atoms have to break for it to be able to deform. So if you've got a metal, it's elastic deformation, that is its ability to bend and bend back, happen between the bonds. So where there's imperfections in the crystal or where you can actually get movement. So molecules / ideas have to be able to slide past one another. Overly linked concepts, if they're too tightly tied to one another and form an ideology, that form a web that come as a block, even though in principle the ideas and the concepts and the connections are what I call severable, the way that a contract can be broken down into pieces, they crystallize into an impermeable construction. So, and I always keep going back to George Kelly. I think 1953. I need to look up the original reference, but he said in his personal construct theory book, which I don't remember what the subtitle was. A person's constructs, no matter how inaccurate, are a part of the physical world and must be accounted for as such. So this is sort of the foundation of constructivism as models of education. I'm not even going to talk about that. I have a whole other thing on constructivism and how different people's use of the word constructivism isn't consistent. Okay. Um, one more, cognitive versus intuitive. And this is the core of the idea, is as I started with with cognitive models versus professionalism, trying to use purely cognitive processes, so thinking with your brain, to model and grapple with complex systems is like playing basketball with your arms tied to your body. You've got so many other ways of, stop scratching the furniture. You've got so many other ways of thinking about the world besides words, besides cognitive processes. I went to bed, I've gone to bed thinking about this stuff almost every night for, you know, ages, years probably. But I've been dreaming about it every night. This is why I'm awake at 4 o'clock in the morning. Don't hit the buttons. And we're our intuitive sensing. We have the capacity, as I said, we bring things into our body and create a map of them inside of our body. Our intuitive sensing lets us sense into complex systems, but we need to use our body as the complete sense orgasm. That'd be good too. Organism. So we bring, as we become experts in something, we bring more and more and more of that knowledge into our intuitive sensing capacity. And we are therefore working with it in a way that we can't articulate it to somebody else. Trying to explain to somebody who doesn't have that expertise, who doesn't have that sophisticated, intuitive, intimate relationship with the system, is a fool's errand. You are fighting against an impossible task. I can hear the cat purring by my head. You cannot explain your intuitive understanding of a complex system to somebody who lacks it. And if they are forcing you to justify your intuitive understanding, it is because they lack intimacy with the system. This is, and I've just been reading Seeing Like a State for the last several months. And it's a slog because it's extremely detailed, but I'm so grateful that he put together the extremely detailed descriptions of how this works in practice in so many different realms. Because what happens is that that simplified cognitive model is used to override the intuitive local understanding of things that are held by people in the system and of the system. And what's horrifying me, listening to Seeing Like a State, is how many times, even at the time that these bad projects were envisioned and constructed, somebody who was an expert, who was on the ground, said to them, this isn't going to work. Here's all the reasons. Your model is too simplistic. It's going to fail. And they weren't listened to. And more, I saw someone on LinkedIn say, oh, well, we need to talk about root cause. And they talk about capitalism as root cause. And like, capitalism is a manifestation of this deeper desire to simplify and cognate models of reality. And then literally we have not just mistaken the map for the territory, but used the map to govern the territory as though the map took precedence. So that is a more fundamental problem, and that is what is in common across all of these things. So even capitalism is one of the most egregious manifestations of substituting the map for the territory. But that's what's happening. And then we automated it, and then we gave it power, and then we created this consensus reality sitting on top of reality. And where it mismatches, we allow the consensus reality to take precedent. And that is our fundamental flaw, is trying to govern the world with cognitive models. And then when it comes into conflict with reality, substituting the model for reality in our reasoning, in our law, in our justifications. That's it. So that's what you get from me at 4 o'clock in the morning with my throat sore and I'm in my pajamas and I've got a cat attacking the cord of my phone, of my computer. But that's some of my best thinking, 4 o'clock in the morning.